Chapter 8. What about all the main countries of the world? Currently, the United States is led by a satanic government under Biden, with Obama pulling the strings in the background. Canada is currently led by a satanic government under Trudeau. Both are descendant countries who have received God's promise to Abraham, yet they are allowing Satan a foothold to destroy everything. And the people are not understanding what's going on. That's why it's imperative for us to know and understand the biblical identities of today's countries, which we currently know by other names. For example, the Bible identifies Israel and the Holy Land, so we can generally go to the world map and point right to it. However, many of us are unable to go to the same map and point out Jacob, Judah, Ishmael, Dan, Esau, or any of the other important characters in the Bible. Or put it another way, we can read the Bible and see how certain characters evolved into countries. But the churches of today don't teach what the modern-day names of those countries are. Where is Jacob? Where is Esau? Where is Ishmael? They are critical players in today's world, but many simply don't know who or where they are. Once again, however, the Bible has all the answers. It actually gives us the identities and histories of many of our current world countries. Knowing this information, we're able to get a clear picture of how and why world events have unfolded in the past, and how they will certainly unfold in the future. Once these national identities have been established and understood, Bible prophecy becomes much easier to follow and comprehend. Simply put, as a nation, if we know who we are and where we've been, we have a much better chance of seeing where we're heading. And if we know the same about other countries, it makes the whole global landscape that much easier to predict and understand. Biblical passages show us the identity of those nations which have become God's chosen people. Throughout the Bible, these people are referred to as the children of Israel, the people who have progressed through the ages to become lost, to become found, and who grew to ultimately become Israel proper, Great Britain, and the United States. We live in the age of information. Yet millions and millions of church-going and Bible-reading citizens have remained uninformed and blinded to the fact that the United States and Great Britain are actually the Promised Land. Yes, they are the Promised Land, promised to Abraham 4,000 years ago. This is documented in the book of Genesis and throughout the Bible. Today, if we ask the average person, where is the Promised Land, he or she would most likely point to Israel on the world map. However, that was only true a little over 2,000 years ago. God actually took the Promised Land away from the Israelites and withheld it from them. When God's people regained this Promised Land, it by then had actually become the United States. Further, when biblical prophecy speaks of the children of Israel, it is speaking directly to the land we all know as Israel in the Middle East. And it is speaking to the United States and to Great Britain. The people in these nations are, in fact, the children of Israel, around which the whole Bible is centered. The Bible is written for and about the citizens of Israel, Great Britain, and the United States. Consider for a moment the relatively brief and dynamic history of the United States. Other countries in the world have histories dating back thousands of years, but the history of the United States as an independent country goes back just a little over 200 years. Yet the U.S. has risen to a world power, the magnitude of which has never before been known to mankind. How could such an important and pivotal country not be mentioned in the Bible? Many may argue that the Bible was written thousands of years before the United States was ever founded. so it just wasn't relevant. But that argument does not hold water. We can follow the entire timeline of the USA by simply going back to the very beginning, in the book of Genesis, chapter 12. There we see Abram, as was his name at the time, without the H and A, was called out as the person upon whom God would create his chosen people. Genesis 12. The Lord had said to Abram, "Leave your country and your people and your father's household, and go to a land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all people on earth will be blessed through you." Important in those verses are three factors. One, that God was calling out Abraham from the rest of the world. Two, God was promising to make Abraham a great nation. And three, God also promised that all the people of the earth would be blessed through his nation. That single passage shows the birth of the United States and Great Britain. Yet at the time, it had no name whatsoever. Abram, without the H and A, simply meant exalted father. But in Genesis chapter 17, God changed his name to Abraham, meaning father of many. And God's promise to Abraham continued. "Neither shall your name any more be called Abram. Your name shall be Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made of you. You shall be exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come out of you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your seed and thy offspring's seed after you." Abraham, upon being called out, was established by God as the father of many nations. It was a promise, a covenant between God and Abraham that would be everlasting and would be passed on to his children and his children's children down through history. And God points out that the entire genetic line would be extensive. "I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring would be counted. I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore." Abraham had been blessed by God and was helped to conceptualize just how great the blessing would be. He was told his offspring would eventually be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. How difficult it must have been for Abraham at the time to conceive of the idea that millions and millions of people would ultimately evolve from him. In fact, the mere idea of Abraham having a genetic line of millions may have been at one point nearly impossible for him to fathom. Abraham's wife, Sarai, whose name God changed to Sarah in chapter 17, could seemingly not give birth to even one child. Genesis chapter 16 gives a fascinating account of how they, while still Abram and Sarai, set out to solve the problem of infertility. Sarai, realizing she could not bear children, offered up her servant Hagar to Abram to impregnate and carry on his seed. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not given birth to any children, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, "Since the Lord has prevented me from having children, please sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have a family by her." Sarai, Abram's wife, gave Hagar, her Egyptian servant, to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she became pregnant. Once Hagar realized she was pregnant, she despised Sarai. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You have brought this wrong on me. I gave my servant into your embrace, but when she realized she was pregnant, she despised me." Abram said to Sarai, "Since your servant is under your authority, do to her whatever you think best." Then Sarai treated Hagar harshly, so she ran away from Sarai. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring that is along the road to Shur. He said, "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" She replied, "I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai." The angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit to her authority. I will greatly multiply your descendants." The angel of the Lord added, "So that they will be too numerous to count." Then the angel of the Lord said to her, "You are now pregnant and are about to give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your painful groans. He will be a wild donkey of a man. He will be hostile to everyone, and everyone will be hostile to him. He will live away from his brothers." The continuing saga between Sarah and Hagar is very interesting. After Hagar gave birth to Ishmael, and he had grown a little, Sarah, at age 91, also gave birth to a son, Isaac. Genesis chapter 21 tells us the story of how Sarah, after giving birth, noticed Ishmael laughing at her, and so forced Abraham to send Hagar and her son away. Abraham prepared a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah noticed the son of Hagar the Egyptian, the son whom Hagar had borne to Abraham, mocking. So she said to Abraham, "Banish that slave woman and her son, for the son of that slave woman will not be an heir along with my son Isaac." Hagar and Ishmael were sent off, but the promise given by the angel of God when Hagar first fled was kept. Ishmael ultimately became the Arabian people. Among the Muslim religion, Ishmael is considered the forefather of Muhammad. This divide explains the historic conflict between the Middle East and the Western world. Although Abraham was the patriarch of both populations, Ishmael, his oldest son, was born of the slave woman and banished. Isaac was born of Sarah, and went on to receive the original blessing given to Abraham by God. Back to Genesis 17. Then God said to Abraham, "As for your wife, you must no longer call her Sarai. Sarah will be her name. I will bless her and will give you a son through her. I will bless her, and she will become a mother of nations. Kings of countries will come from her." Then Abraham bowed down with his face to the ground and laughed as he said to himself, "Can a son be born to a man who is 100 years old? Can Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? Abraham asked God to reconsider and place the blessing upon Ishmael instead. God said, "No, Sarah, your wife, is going to bear you a son, and you will name him Isaac. I will confirm my covenant with him as a perpetual covenant for his descendants after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will indeed bless him, make him fruitful, and give him a multitude of descendants. He will become the father of 12 princes. I will make him into a great nation. But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this set time next year." From that point forward, the Bible is speaking to the descendants of Isaac. The story of Isaac is generally well known, but he was still very young. God commanded Abraham to build an altar and kill Isaac upon it. Abraham, as he had always done, acted in complete faith to God, and proceeded to build the altar and take Isaac up onto it to be killed. At the very last moment, when Abraham had the knife in his hand and was ready to kill his one and only son, God stopped him. It had merely been a test. God was testing Abraham's faith. When God saw that nothing, not even the death of his son, would cause Abraham to waver in his faith, he stopped the killing of Isaac and further added to Abraham's blessing. God said, "I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this, and you have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sands of seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed." Isaac began to grow up, and eventually his mother Sarah died, and Abraham himself was getting very old. Abraham commissioned one of his servants to go back to his original homeland and find a wife for Isaac. The story is well known of how the servant came upon Rebekah, and how she agreed to go back to his country and marry Isaac. What is often overlooked, however, is how Rebekah's family blessed her before she journeyed off to be Isaac's wife. They said, "Our sister, may you become the mother of thousands, of 10,000s. May your descendants possess the gates of their enemies." Rebekah's blessing has manifested throughout history and is very prevalent today, as will be discussed shortly. Isaac and Rebekah married and eventually had twin sons, Esau and Jacob. Esau exited the womb first and was thus considered the firstborn and heir to God's blessing, which Abraham had passed on to Isaac. Receiving the blessing was Esau's birthright. However, one day when he came in from hunting and was famished, he traded his birthright to Jacob in exchange for some stew that Jacob had prepared. In addition, Rebekah herself intervened and saw that Jacob, not Esau, received God's original blessing. Now, in our modern world, possessions are passed along by way of a last will and testament or a trust, an official document that is prepared during a person's lifetime and executed upon his or her death. In the time of Isaac, however, possessions and blessings were passed along by way of a ceremony before God. When Isaac became very old, blind, and ready to die, he summoned Esau to him and said, "My son, since I am old, I could die at any time. Therefore take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out into the open fields and hunt down some wild game for me. Then prepare for me some tasty food, the kind I love, and bring it to me. Then I will eat it, so that I may bless you before I die." So Isaac was setting up this ceremony, through which he would pass Esau the blessings that were bestowed on him by Abraham, who had received them from God. Rebekah overheard the conversation, and when Esau went out to hunt the game, Rebekah summoned Jacob and said, "Look, I overheard your father tell your brother Esau, 'Bring me some wild game and prepare for me some tasty food. Then I will eat it and bless you in the presence of the Lord before I die.' Now then, my son, do exactly what I tell you. Go to the flock and get me 2 of the best young goats. I'll prepare them in a tasty way for your father, just the way he loves them. Then you will take it to your father. Thus he will eat it and bless you before he dies." Jacob was hesitant. He said to Rebekah, "But Esau, my brother, is a hairy man, and I have smooth skin. My father may touch me. Then he'll think I'm mocking him, and I'll bring a curse on myself instead of a blessing." But Rebekah said, Any curse against you will fall on me, my son. Just obey me. Go and get them for me." The story continues. So he went and got the goat and brought them to his mother. She prepared some tasty food, just the way his father loved it. Then Rebekah took her older son Esau's best clothes, which she had with her in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. She put the skins of the young goats on his hands and the smooth part of his neck. Then she handed the tasty food and the bread that she had made to her son Jacob. Jacob went into the room with his father Isaac, fed him the food Rebekah had prepared, but which he thought had been prepared and was being presented by Esau. They ate, and then Isaac passed the blessing on to Jacob. Jacob received the blessing. Later, when Esau returned, prepared the food, and went in to present it to Isaac and receive the blessing, Isaac realized that it was Jacob who had come in earlier, and who had now received the blessing. He had no other blessing to give Esau. Jacob received God's blessing, and, fearful that Esau may take his life, fled his household and went to live with Laban, Rebekah's brother. Esau eventually wandered away from home, married a woman from the descendants of Ishmael, and established what became the Edomites, which in the current world is modern-day Jordan. Jacob lived with Laban and fell in love with his daughter Rachel. Jacob agreed to work for Laban for 7 years in exchange for Rachel's hand in marriage. When the 7 years had expired, however, Laban sent his older daughter Leah into Jacob's bedroom. Jacob slept with her, but in the morning realized he'd been duped by Laban. He confronted Laban, who explained, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the firstborn. Complete my older daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one too, in exchange for 7 more years of work." So Jacob married both Leah and Rachel, and of the two, he loved Rachel. Between the two of them, they bore Jacob 12 children. From Leah, Judah was born, who became the patriarch of the line of descendants from which King David and Jesus were born. From Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin were born, and it was through Joseph that Abraham's original blessing, which was passed to Isaac and which was passed to Jacob, would perpetuate. Jacob's name was changed to Israel, and throughout the Bible the names are used interchangeably, Jacob and Israel. They are the same person. The 12 children of Jacob, Leah, and Rachel became the 12 tribes of Israel. The story of Jacob, or Israel's son Joseph, is generally well known. Born of Rachel, Joseph was different than his brothers in many ways. They grew to despise him, and at one point conspired together to kill him. They ended up selling him into slavery in Egypt, and deceived their father Israel into thinking he'd been killed by wild animals. As the story goes, Joseph, a slave, interpreted the Pharaoh of Egypt's dream, much like Daniel later on in history, and he was exalted to the second highest ranking position in Egypt. Eventually, he was reunited with his brothers and with his father, Israel, just prior to Israel's death. Being very happy to see his son again, after thinking he'd been dead for many years, Israel decided to pass the blessing from God to Abraham to Isaac to Israel on to Joseph through his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. In linear terms, the blessing went like this: God, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Israel, Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. The passage in Genesis where this passing of the blessing on to Ephraim and Manasseh is detailed is very critical. It is the beginning of the United States and Great Britain. Genesis 48, verse 8. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, "Who are these?" And Joseph said to his father, "They are my sons, whom God has given me here." So he said, "Bring them to me, please, so that I may bless them." Now the eyes of Israel were so dim from age that he could not see, and Joseph brought them close to him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your children as well." Then Joseph took them from his knees and bowed with his face to the ground. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right, and brought them close to him. But Israel reached out his right hand and placed it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, crossing his hands, although Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads. I let my name be on them. And the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." When Joseph saw his father place his right hand on Ephraim's head, it displeased him. And he grasped his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, "Not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Place your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He also will become a people, and he also will be great. However, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations." So he blessed them that day, saying, "By you Israel will pronounce blessing, saying, May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh." And so he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Enter the United States and Great Britain. Manasseh was Israel's oldest grandson from Joseph. Ephraim was the youngest. By general tradition, Manasseh should have received the greater blessing. But Israel knew what he was doing by putting the younger in front of the older. Manasseh would become a great nation, and Ephraim would become a multitude of nations. There is often confusion even today among scholars who acknowledge that Ephraim and Manasseh are the first fruits of Great Britain and the United States. Some believe that because Manasseh was older, he must be Great Britain, and the younger and greater brother, Ephraim, must be the United States. But just the opposite is true, and the answer is right there in the passage itself. Ephraim would become a multitude of nations, such as a commonwealth of nations. And Manasseh would become a great nation, such as the single greatest nation in the history of the world, the USA. It becomes an ethnocentric argument at times. Oh, the United States is greater, and so that must be Ephraim. But Great Britain clearly fits the description much better. It consists of a multitude of nations, including the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, South Africa, and 49 other countries around the world. The United States is one country. Manasseh would be one nation. Manasseh is the United States. Ephraim is Great Britain. The argument is pointless, actually. What is significant is that later in the Bible, when several tribes of Israel are kicked out of the original Promised Land, including Manasseh and Ephraim, they migrate north and west out of Israel proper and ultimately settle in Europe and become known as the Anglo-Saxons. The word Saxon is interesting. It is derived from Sax sons, referring to the sons of Isaac. And what is very important to extract from these passages in Genesis is what Jacob, Israel, said regarding his grandsons, Ephraim and Manasseh, as he was blessing them. "Let my name be on them." He is referring to both his name, Israel, and his name, Jacob. Let the name Jacob and Israel be upon them, upon Ephraim and Manasseh, upon the United States and Great Britain. Two reasons for the importance of understanding that the names Israel and Jacob have been given to the United States and Great Britain, which together comprise pretty much the entire Western world. One, when the Bible is talking about Israel and the children of Israel, we can understand that it is talking directly to the United States, Great Britain, and all of Western civilization. Two, in relation to the end times, the world we live in today, we can find hope in this passage. Jeremiah 30, verse 7. "Woe, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It shall even be a time of Jacob's trouble, but he will be saved out of it." Jacob is the Western world, the United States, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Most recently, we can cite what happened during the satanic-pushed COVID debacle. Look what happened in Australia and Canada, two relatively peaceful places on the planet. Thwarted trucker convoys, forced vaccinations, internment camps, nationwide lockdowns. Look at the United States. Unguarded borders, transgender agendas in the elementary schools, big business moving out of Satan-run cities such as New York and Chicago. The time of Jacob's trouble is clearly at hand. "Let my name be on them." We are Jacob. It is the time of our trouble, but we will be saved out of it. Also, remember the blessing given to Rebekah as she was leaving her family to go marry Isaac. "May your descendants possess the gates of their enemies." Rebekah was the great-grandmother of Ephraim and Manasseh. Between the two, both the United States and Great Britain have owned almost all of the important ports, seaways, and strategic landmasses in the world, including the British Isles, the Falkland Islands, Bermuda, the Bahamas, the Virgin Islands, St. Croix, St. Lucia, San Juan, Barbados, Antigua, Gibraltar, the Panama Canal, Hawaii, Midway, Alexandria, the Khyber Pass, the Straits of Malacca, the Anatolian Peninsula, Brunei, the Aleutians, Hong Kong, Singapore, New Guinea, Ceylon, Kenya, Wake Island, the list goes on and on. The fact that the United States and Great Britain were direct descendants of Jacob's son, Joseph, through his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, is relatively common and accepted knowledge in worldwide biblical history, in spite of the fact that the beast and all of its satanic governments over time have tried to oppress the knowledge.